All right, good afternoon and welcome to the Jefferson County Commission meeting. This is a special session. It's Wednesday, September 14th, 2022. It's 1 p.m. Purpose of this meeting is a special session to hold a workshop for the Hilltop House Hotel Tax Increment Funding Program, which is TIP. Thank you all for coming. If you would like to introduce yourself, and we're just going to turn the floor over to you. What you do. Let's start.
Okay. I'm Laura Zamansky. I'm the Hilltop House Hotel Project Manager.
I'm Brett Stewart. I'm with Swana along with Laurel. I work with the shop helping to develop this project, and I think we met by phone a few weeks ago, so happy to be here.
Yes.
I'm John Stump, Stepped on Johnson. Happily, my voice is not as incomprehensible as it was, hopefully, during our call a few weeks ago. So pleased to be here. I've been working with the Hilltop House over the last several years as we move the project forward, and hopefully very close to seeing construction.
We can hear you good today.
Good.
It just sounded like you were in a tunnel.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. Well, I'll go ahead and yield the floor to you guys. I know you have a nice program for us, and by all means, I know at the end we'll certainly have some questions, I hope. And but have at it, guys. Thank you all for coming, and you can have the floor.
You want me to? Sure. I kicked it off last time, so I'll do that again. You know, as I mentioned, we're very thankful to have your time. You know, we don't take it for granted, so we appreciate you setting aside the time this afternoon. I'll keep my portion really brief so we can get into John's content and save a lot of time for questions at the end. But as you all know, I mentioned on the call last week, we have made a lot of progress on Hilltop House Hotel, and it's been our, Laurel and ours and Fred and Karen's goal to rebuild this hotel to its former glory, and to really build, a lodging property that becomes a destination and flagship for Jefferson County that not just welcomes tourists, but also that really provides like successful and attractive jobs, and that really supports the livelihoods of people throughout the county. And, we, as you may recall, and I mentioned briefly, last August, we got approved for a tourism development district by the Economic Development Office of the state, which was a huge milestone for us. In a nutshell, what that did for us is it gave us sort of a development framework so that we could actually start, further the development and the plans and the designs and everything. And since then, we spent a lot of money bringing on designers, engineers, consultants across the board that have really helped us. And we've made good progress that we weren't able to do until we got that step. So we're very thankful for the state and the office there that allowed us to do that. And then, throughout, we're continuing to get this program sort of locked in, all the while sort of making sure that we're honoring that historic architectural and the integrity of the place, including salvaging some of the stone that will be reused. So we're well on our way there, and also trying to be respectful of Harper's Ferry and the community that surrounds us. And not surprisingly, sort of as I mentioned last week, as we've developed plans, we've also gotten updates on budgets. The development cost has gone through the roof, quite frankly, since we first started this. And the last few years has not really helped that. That's really like just kind of gone wild, and construction costs being a big portion of that, labor and materials. We're even seeing it on some of the engineering and other fees that we have to incur just because everyone is so busy and in this environment. So that's certainly headwind. The other one of which we, couldn't have really anticipated coming into this project was the cost of financing. Cost of financing has gone up, as everyone hears on the news, tremendously in the last year. Interest rates are the highest they've been in well over a decade, and that we're not immune to that. And unfortunately, the macroeconomic events like the war in Ukraine, supply chain issues, and inflation still have not been resolved since they sort of burst onto the scene earlier this year. And yesterday's numbers on inflation, unfortunately, sort of paint the picture that interest rates are going to likely move higher even more going into the latter half of this year. So we're kind of up against two brewing storms, if you will, on that front. Nonetheless, we are still very committed to this project. We really want to see it through to fruition. And in total, we're looking at an investment in the county of over $150 million. And a lot of which, there's been a lot of money and blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into getting us this far. But, as we kind of are nearing the completion of design, we're trying to shore up the financing, which is obviously why we're here, because we need your help on these critical two pieces today. John will get into it, but there's essentially the real property tax TIF program, and then there's the excise tax TIF. And we understand that these would be both new programs that for the county to execute. So we're aware, that it might be unfamiliar, but that's why we are very thankful to have this session, so we can kind of knowledge share and have the open discussion. John can, point to some other areas in the state that have successfully used programs like this. And before I hand it over, I'd just like to say that, as you're thinking through sort of the mechanics of how these programs work and what it means for the county, is that, these programs, as we've mentioned, help get this project built, which then in turn allows us to generate pretty meaningful income, wealth, and taxes for the county over and above the taxes that we're talking about today. That runs gamut from a B&O tax to sales tax to hotel and motel tax, that when you look at it in its entirety, is very meaningful, significant dollars to the county that we, and jobs, that we feel pretty strongly is a huge benefit for the project. So I'll just, leave it with that. As I mentioned before, given where we are with the construction costs and financing, it's going to be really hard for us to close that funding gap without the help of these two programs. So we just ask for your, open-mindedness and, partnership on trying to get this done.
Okay, so what you have before you is a PowerPoint presentation, which I've given innumerable times around the state. What we are talking about, as Fred alluded to, is two different programs. They're similar in some ways, but they have different nuances. These programs have been used very successfully around the state. I'll give you some examples. If you're familiar with Morgantown and University Town Center, which is off the Star City exit, there's both sides of I-79 have developed dramatically, and both of these programs have been used there. In Charleston, there's a fly ash pond that's being filled in South Charleston, actually not Charleston, but South Charleston. These programs have been used in that location as well. There are other situations like where Cabela's, now it's Bass Pro Shop, outside of Wheeling, that was the first sales tax TIF in the state, also has a real property TIF. There are a total of 4 sales tax TIFs, and we'll get into the distinction here in a moment. There are probably 40 real property tax TIFs around the state. They've been used everywhere from Cabell County and Huntington to Wheeling to Weirton, Kanawha County, really everywhere but the Eastern Panhandle, which is very surprising given the amount of growth here. There was one real property TIF that was done in Martinsburg, and because the developer ran into financial trouble and I think actually passed away, the TIF was not very successful, but the developer bore all the risk of that. So that's been the only situation where a tax increment financing district has been done in the Eastern Panhandle. So we're bringing something that's novel, not just to Jefferson County, but Berkeley County, Morgan County. And in fact, Mineral County has done one. That would be the closest county where you've done a real property TIF, the county and the state has. So I am going to flip through is this being broadcast? Yes. It is. Okay, so then I'll flip through the PowerPoint, even though I know you all can't see it. So as I said, overview, we are talking about 2 different programs. We refer to a real property TIF because it involves the ad valorem property taxes that are assessed and charged to the taxpayers in the county. And then the Economic Opportunity Development District, EODD, we refer to that as a sales tax TIF colloquially because it's easier than EODD and no one remembers, or at least I can't remember what the acronym stands for. So we'll just refer to it as a sales tax TIF. So property TIFs, again, it's the ad valorem taxes. There was a constitutional amendment that was passed back in 2003, I believe, that authorized the creation of a TIF program. So what does TIF stand for? Tax increment financing. The basic idea here is if you take a greenfield development, so you've got 100 acres of greenfield property, there's nothing on it. You come in and you drop in a commercial development that's worth $100 million. So the property before the development was worth $1 million. After the development, it's worth $100 million. The additional tax on that $99 million differential, just the additional tax on it, that's the increment. So that increment on a monthly, or excuse me, annual basis can be redirected to pay costs associated, development costs associated with the area within inside the TIF district or for the benefit of the TIF district. Okay, so what we're doing here is taking incremental property taxes that do not presently exist. It doesn't impact existing property taxes at all. It's purely property taxes that don't exist off of the incremental value of the growth and then redirecting those property taxes to pay development costs within the TIF district. Okay, so that's the concept. There's a graph here in a few minutes which will show you how bad my stylistic abilities are, but that's the concept. Who can create a TIF district? Well, it's county commissions, class 1, class 2, class 3 municipalities, a real property TIF. So Harpers Ferry could not create a real property TIF as a class 4 municipality. What can we pay for with TIF? Infrastructure. That's the sweet spot. Roads, streetscapes, water, sewer, stormwater, fiber optic. You can pay for land acquisition, though that's not our intention here. You can pay for new buildings, including parking structures, which is part of our plan for the use of real property TIF here. Renovate existing buildings, demolition, other capital costs, okay? So the statute itself, the TIF statute, is very broad in what you can use the monies for that come from that increment, okay? All right, so TIF district, it has to be contiguous. So you can't have a piece here and a piece over here that aren't attached. In this case, what we're talking about doing is really about 9 parcels or 12 parcels that are going to be solely the footprint of the hotel. That's it. So we're only talking about the footprint of the hotel, and we can get you a map of that very quickly. We're not going to be impacting property taxes anywhere else within the county or within Harpers Ferry. It's purely the hotel footprint. The next line says the county commission must obtain prior written, must get the consent of the municipality to create a TIF district. That's not correct in this case. Okay, this is a general presentation because with the creation of the tourism development district, the necessity of the municipality consenting was removed. So in this case, there's no necessity of Harpers Ferry to consent to the creation of the TIF district. The project in this case is being proposed by Swan. There are other TIF districts where the county commission actually proposes its own TIF district or a municipality proposes it. In Greenbrier County, we created a TIF district that includes an entire tax map or magisterial district, includes the Greenbrier Hotel and the Sporting Club. But the increment off that was utilized to build a new wastewater treatment plant for the city of White Sulphur Springs. And the city requested the development in that, the creation of the TIF district in that case. All right, here's my pathetic graph. So again, tax increment. You can see here, I'm going to use this little pointer. Oh, that's really fun. You can see the project goes, if you look at the left-hand side of the page, goes from $100 in value, the property does. Suddenly it's up to $1,000 in value. So the $100 is your base assessed value. So that's your base value. That's what the county is receiving right now in tax. The county and the municipality and the state are receiving in tax off of the property. So then this diagonal line, that shows the property, the construction and the creation of that additional capital that is then taxed So that shows your initial increment when it says into development. So your value goes from $100 to $1,000. You have a $900 incremental value of the property. That's not the amount of the tax that comes off of it. That's the amount that's subject to the tax, right? And then, of course, your assessed value generally will continue to go up over time. You may see additional development within the TIF district that increases the increment. Equipment can go down in value. You can see a decrease in increment if equipment goes down in value. So, but you can see over here in red, that is your increment. So that's the incremental value that is then subject to the tax. The base assessed value will work with the assessor, the county assessor, and we've already had some conversations with the assessor in order to establish what the base value is of the property right now. And again, we're only talking about the footprint of the hotel. This gets into a whole lot of stuff that is not really that interesting. It's very technical, but importantly, excess levies and bond levies are not deposited, are not moved aside, okay? So for example, you all have a school bond levy, I believe. Well, that levy would be untouched by this. That levy would continue to be collected, and in fact, that levy will increase in value because of the $130, $150 million that Swan is going to put on that property. That would be $150 million in property that is subject to that excess levy. I've created TIF districts in 15 counties. I've never had a Board of Education show up and object to the creation of a TIF district. Not once. And in part, it's because their bond levy and or excess levies, if they have it, sometimes boards of ed have excess levies, are not negatively impacted. In fact, they're positively impacted because you're spurring growth. Okay. Additionally, you ask, so this additional tax paid on the increment, where would that tax have gone without TIF? Well, 4 places. State gets 1%. You all get about 30%. The Harper's Ferry gets about what, 15%? Roughly.
Yeah.
15%. Remainder goes to school board. However, school board's not negatively impacted because of the school aid form. This does not count against them in any way with the school aid form. So it's neutral to them. And that's very important because schools are critical, but it is made up through the state school aid formula. So there's a couple different ways you can take TIF, the real property TIF, and monetize it. The first way is for the county to issue bonds, which are then paid by the money that comes out of that incremental tax. Nothing else. The county is not on the hook for those bonds in any way, shape, or form. They are purely paid by that incremental tax. The bondholders know that, the people that buy the bonds. TIF is very common in other states, much more common than it is here. In Florida, virtually every big box store you see is financed with TIF because the local government doesn't care about the property taxes. What they want is the B&O tax and the sales tax off of it. So when we first implemented TIF in the state, I got lots of phone calls from developers in Florida wanting to drop a big box store in, and because that's what they did. That's how they did it in Florida. We were the 47th or 48th state to actually begin a TIF program. So we were one of the very last. It's very common. So there's a market out there for this type of bond issue. It's very similar in many respects to what you would see from Harper's Ferry or Shepherdstown or Charlestown, in the sense that the county commission is not on the hook for those bonds. Like back when you had Jefferson County PSD, the county commission was not on the hook for the bonds, the debt of Jefferson County PSD. And that issue has come up actually in the context of Harrison County and their sales tax TIF, because it went into default. And it was very clear because it was done right after 2008. So The TIF can be created for up to 30 years. Okay, and in our case, we would be looking at a 30-year period if possible, if the county agrees. So the other option is pay as you go, which means that the monies become available on an annual basis. You do have a lag. Okay, so let's say that the TIF district is created in 2023. It would go back to the base assessed value as of July 1, 2022. However, so let's, so Swan starts construction in 2023, and let's say by some miracle it's done in 2024. It won't be. It's 2 to 3 year construction period, but I can't keep track of the numbers. So, but the bottom line is whatever incremental amount increases between 2023 and 2024, those dollars don't become available until September of 2025 because of the, since we pay property taxes in arrears. So while it's a 30-year maturity, it's not quite that long when you start looking at the time period, the lag of the time period. Are there any questions at all? I know this is a lot. It's right after lunch. Everybody's, no? Okay. All right. Project costs, we talked about this, that these are all the things you can spend the TIF money on. In our case, the primary focus of the TIF money will be number one, infrastructure, stormwater, water, sewer, roads to some extent. Happily, there's not an enormous amount of infrastructure, that type of infrastructure that needs done at the site. So the remainder of the TIF funds will be utilized for a parking garage that will be open to the public. Okay, so while Swan will own it and the hotel will own it and operate it, it will be open to the public. You all may or may not be aware that the overlook, which sits at the very end, overlooks the confluence of the rivers, that has a 24-hour 365 easement for members of the public to go to that overlook. Now, if you had, I don't know, Brad Pitt there and you had to put up security, maybe that's a bad example, I don't know. But if you had to put up security, they might close off the overlook for something like that, or if you had, president there. But bottom line is there is that easement there that's available. That was a really big concern of the municipal of Harpers Ferry, and Swan was very committed to providing that access for the public. Well, that parking garage is going to be helpful there because it's going to be helpful for people to drive up, park, and walk to the to the overlook. Additionally, the hotel itself is open. I mean, there will be amenities at the hotel that will be open for use by members of the public, such as the spa. So what's positive about that, the TIF? Okay, first of all, it's locally controlled. Now, a TIF district, the way this works as far as the approval process is the county commission would have two actions. There would be a resolution establishing, well, first of all, we would finalize an application for creation of the TIF district. Submit that to the county commission along with a request for setting a public hearing for the public to speak on the application. That application is also provided to the Board of Education and the West Virginia Development Office. So, and will also be supplied to Town of Harpers Ferry. So resolution is considered by county commission. Then we hold the public hearing. There's a resolution of the county commission authorizing the submission of the application to the West Virginia Development Office. West Virginia Development Office has 60 days by statute to either approve or deny the application. We have had some preliminary conversations with the Development Office, actually fairly in-depth conversations with the Development Office about the project. As far as utilizing TIF for the project, they're supportive of utilizing TIF for the project. So we've done lots of applications, so we're pretty confident we're going to give them something they'll approve. After they approve the application, we come back to the county commission with a resolution creating the TIF district. Now, probably the biggest public policy point here is what we call the but-for test. And basically what that says is but for the use of tax increment financing, this project would not occur. And that's a decision that the county commission makes during the resolution process. And we'll be able to show you where the gaps are in the financing so that the county commission will see that and be able to say, yes, but for TIF, this project wouldn't occur because a $150 million project with approximately 130 hotel rooms just probably doesn't cash flow without some help on the construction side. There are requirements that go along with the TIF monies. You have to competitively bid the project or the contracts, pardon me. You have to comply with the Western Jobs Act, which means the employees, the labor has to come from within a certain list of counties within, I think it's 100 miles of the state, which actually ends up being an enormous number of counties because of how close you all are to so many other states. Of course, we have the public hearing requirement. That's really the policy protections and also standards for considering TIF applications. So this is the process that I just went over, the draft application, proposed the district, notice to the school board and Harpers Ferry and the State Development Office, or Department of Development now, sorry, changed the name on us. And then you have your public hearing after publication. And then the application goes to the Development Office. So then they've got their 60 days. We come back to you all and ask for an order creating the TIF district. The actual issuance of bonds would occur after the TIF district is created, approximately at the same time construction starts. So that's when the bond issue would actually occur. And that would go through the county commission as well, requires an order of the county. These are the obligations, ongoing obligations, which will be really the responsibility of SWAN to take care of these on behalf of the county. Those will come to the county for approval. You have a requisition process for the proceeds of the bonds. So as they receive invoices for paying for the parking garage, for example, they'd be bringing those to your meetings for approval. You have to ensure that the tax increment is collected, which really falls on the assessor and the sheriff primarily. We have had situations where the assessor's office or the sheriff's office didn't include some parcels or whatever the case might be. That develops a problem. Happily here, we have a very limited number of parcels. Again, just the footprint of the hotel. There is an annual report that has to be filed with the Department of Development each year. There's a publication required every 5 years. And again, if the bonds are sold publicly, there's continuing disclosure obligations. We don't anticipate that initially. Bottom line is each one of these requirements, while there will be action of the county commission required as far as additional administrative tasks, it really falls to SWAN to bring those things to you all for your consideration. There is a strong likelihood that the bonds here will be purchased by the developer. And again, it's important to note that all of the risk associated with this project, whether it's construction risk or operation risk, and the impact it would have on the bonds is solely the responsibility of the holder of the bonds. Now, they may have other arrangements with the developer, such as guarantees that they would exercise, but the county has no obligation whatsoever. If the hotel went up in flames, goodness, let's hope it never happens, and TIF bonds were outstanding, well, that would be between the bondholders and the developer to rebuild that, what the insurance requirements are, all those sorts of things. So that's, in this case, because this is a new district and it's a very limited district. I mean, essentially you have what you do. You have one taxpayer is what you have. So that's a more risky situation. That's no reflection on the Schaufelds, it's just a reality. So we likely will see a situation where the Schaufelds or a developer or one of their sub entities actually purchases the bonds from the real property. So as far as successful TIF projects, I think that you can look at University Town Center as a really good example of a large TIF project. Another good TIF project is we did one in Putnam County, which includes most of the valley outside of Hurricane. And that has resulted in, they built a new park for the county, including soccer fields, et cetera. So there are lots of positives here. Primarily, you have a developer who's willing to take the risk. So that's real property tips. So are there any questions at all? If you won't have any questions, anybody? No? Okay. Sure.
In your procedural drop down, does it go to Harper's Ferry for any type of input or permission?
No, Harper's Ferry does not have a sign off on it or approval of the application. They will receive a copy of it. And of course, they can show up here as part of the public hearing process. So Economic Opportunity Development Districts, again, this is sales tax tip. That's how we easily refer to it. Okay, so this is created under two different code sections. Depends on whether you're a county or municipality creating the district. So in this case, since it's for county, we're under 722. So the idea here is this hotel will charge sales and use tax on purchases, right? The idea here is to redirect that incremental sales and use tax, because right now there is zero sales and use tax being charged up on that site because there's nothing there. So the idea is to redirect that incremental and additional sales and use tax that comes about as a result of creation of the hotel, again, to pay costs associated with the construction of the hotel, not operations, but construction. So that's why we refer to this as a sales tax tip, because you're redirecting the sales tax. County commissions can create EODDs, and as can all classes of municipalities. However, EODDs, sales tax tips, require not only the approval of West Virginia Development or Department of Development, but also require approval of the West Virginia Legislature. Why is that? Because the state lives in large part off sales taxes. Very important to them. So currently there are only 4 sales tax tips in the state. We talked about Fort Henry, that's where Cabela's, now Bass Pro Shop is. Charles Point, which is in Harrison County. It's across the interstate from where our building is. If you're going north, we're on the west side, it's on the east side. There's a Menards being built there now. University Town Center, that's probably the largest growth and largest development of any sales tax tip in the state. And Park Place in South Charleston, which, as I said, is the fly ash pond that's being filled in. And they're putting in various retail establishments there. So we have to show that there's at least $75 million in private capital to be invested within the first 2 years. So that's not going to be a problem, right? It's not going to be an issue. Eligible projects, really virtually anything associated with the project can be paid for from the sales tax tip. So that'll, in this case, it'll include costs associated with construction of the hotel. So what are the benefits? So if you want to ask whose ox is getting gored, to the extent that this project would have been built without sales tax tip, it's the state. The 1% sales tax that the city, that the Harper's Ferry charges is still collected by Harper's Ferry, or still received. They don't actually collect it, but it's still received by Harper's Ferry. So that 1%, that is a significant amount for Harper's Ferry, will still be received by Harper's Ferry. County doesn't receive any sales and use tax. So it doesn't impact the county whatsoever. It's really the state. It's the only entity that's impacted. Of course, you have local control here. Again, you have the but-for test. But for sales tax TIF, this project would not occur. The budget that we currently have for sales tax TIF, it is a 30-year term, is approximately $20 million. So it is a significant piece of the overall capital stack for this project. I don't think I told you all that and I apologize, the piece attributable to the real property TIF right now is approximately $15 million. So you're talking about of a total $150 million capital stack up to $35 million from those two sources. Again, entirely at the risk of the developer. The sales tax TIF, just like the real property TIF, there's no risk to the county if the project doesn't succeed. The risk is on the purchaser of the bonds and also on the developer. So here's the process. We prepare an application. We talk to the Western Development Office about it, run the application by them, which we've already talked to them. They're aware of this. They're generally supportive. There'll be 2 actions by the county commission. There'll be a resolution scheduling a public hearing. This is after we submit the application to you. And then there will be a resolution approving the submission of the application to the Development Office. Development Office reviews the application and acts on the application. They'll issue a written certification to the county if they approve it. We won't go to the Development Office if we don't think we're not pretty confident they're gonna approve it, which we are. And then we have to go to the legislature. So that requires actually the amendment of statute to include the Hilltop House EODD under the statute which created the other 4. So the legislative session starts January 15th. We would very much like to make that legislative session if at all possible, because this is an integral part of the financing for the project. And if we don't make it this year, we got to wait until 2023, or excuse me, 2024. So there's a list of criteria the Development Office considers. It's the type of things you would anticipate. And again, here, let's just be clear, the sales tax TIF will be limited to solely the footprint of the hotel. We're not touching sales tax in other parts of the village or other parts of the county. It's solely the hotel itself. It will be the smallest sales tax TIF in the state by a substantial margin. And it will be purely standalone because it will be entirely dependent upon whether or not this project is successful. So that's a whole lot of information. I'm happy to answer any questions. I also handed out my card. My cell phone number is on the front. If you have questions, please call me. And I guess the final point is, well, what's our ask? We would like to present you all with applications for the creation of the real property TIF and the sales tax TIF at an upcoming meeting. I know you all have a regular meeting tomorrow. It's not going to be then, but it would be possible to present those at your next upcoming meeting. We would like to do that. That doesn't obligate the county commission to do anything. Okay. We would ask that the resolution be put on the agenda because that starts the clock ticking for us. There'll be plenty of time for people to ask questions, whether it's county commissioners or the public, whoever it might be. And then we would put together a proposed schedule based upon that next meeting date.
And if I could just add one thing on that sales tax TIF, I mentioned this on the call last time, but you may be familiar, but we did receive a tourism development credit that essentially credits the sales tax back to us. So the state has already the office that gave that, approved the act, gave us sort of the blessing to utilize the sales tax to benefit the construction of the project. Shifting to this is just using the statute to allow us to get access to the capital upfront via the bond program, where as opposed to taking it over a very long period of time, which doesn't unfortunately help us now when we're needing to fund the whole project.
The sales tax TIF is extended longer. It's 30 years versus 10 years. However, as Brett said, in addition to that financial advantage, the other major advantage here is they can issue bonds secured by those future revenues, future sales tax revenues, and thus have the money up front for the capital stack. The way the credit works, it's really not possible. I mean, I know with historic tax credits, you can sell them. Well, this is a state income tax credit, so it's very different. You're not selling a federal credit, and it's a larger amount. So this would allow them to issue those bonds and have the dollars up front, which they can't realistically do under the Tourism Development Act. And the Tourism Development Act was a prerequisite to the Tourism Development District. So there are lots of projects in the state that qualify under the Tourism Development Act. Presently, there are permitted to be up to 5 tourism development districts. There's presently only 1, though there are a couple more that are under discussion in other parts of the state.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
How much of a bond are we talking about issuing?
It would be up to $20 million for the sales tax TIF. Maybe a little, it might be a little higher with costs. It might be 22 or 23. The real property TIF would be in the range of 15 to 17 on the outside. Now those are maximum, pretty much maximum amounts.
And do you have projections already built to show how these TIFs are going to be able to repay the terms of the bond obligations that you can send to me?
Yes, we're putting those together now, and we need to finalize them. They're very close to being final. We will absolutely have those in the application, okay? And in addition, well, we'll have them in the application as well. They'll show there. We have a third-party consultant who does this across the country, who's actually putting those numbers together to show what the property taxes and the sales and use taxes will be, and also what they'll
What the
support.
projection is to be able to support it. And then I have a couple more questions. I know you already answered these. I
That's
just
fine.
want to ask them again.
Sure.
Why doesn't Harper's Ferry need to consent? I don't know, you can ask them, but I probably didn't hear the why.
Sure. It's the tourism development district. Well, first of all, the sales tax TIF doesn't require consent
Right.
by the county or the city either way. Okay, because it doesn't impact either one. The real property TIF, the way the statute is drafted, well, the tourism development district, which was created to provide regulatory certainty for the Hilltop House development, contains a provision in it that consent to the creation of the TIF district is not required.
And then you also mentioned this, but I just want to ask it one more time. Who issues the bonds? We're not issuing the bonds. You would be issuing the bonds. It would be between Swan and the bond purchaser, or
Actually, the county commission does issue the bonds, you just have no liability.
no liability?
Right. County commission issues the bonds in both cases. It doesn't count against your bond, your bond capacity, so to speak, under your general obligation capacity. It has no impact on your general. In fact, you couldn't use general revenues to pay debt service limit bond issue if you wanted to. It's not permitted under statute, specifically not permitted. So we just pay it, those bonds are payable solely from those incremental real property taxes and incremental sales.
Okay. I've never actually issued a TIF bond, so this would be new for me. I understand the point where the incremental taxes are placed into a separate fund to pay for those first few years, the first, half of the time, there's probably not going to be revenue in that debt service fund to pay it. So does the developer then need to make the payments, or does the bond typically have a balloon payment or a payment structure that allows for that build up or that gradual increase? Is that how that works?
It's an excellent question, because you're absolutely right. There's a 2 to 3 year period there where due to the lag, there's no money coming in, or it's an amount below where we're going to end up at on the total increment. That's addressed in a couple of different ways. It can be that the developer pays the interest, okay? And that's probably going to depend on which bond issue we're talking about, real property tax. That's likely to occur. In the sales tax, what's most likely going to happen is there'll be a portion of the amount that's borrowed will be utilized to pay that interest during the construction period and before it comes online.
That's everything.
No, that's great. Those are great questions. Now, as you have other questions, please don't hesitate. And please call myself.
Thank you.
And if you want me to, and if you would like, I can put you in touch with some folks at other counties. Jeremy Young in Putnam County comes to mind. He's very, very knowledgeable. Has done multiple TIF districts.
Okay.
If that'd be helpful, I'm
Yes,
happy.
it would be. Like I said, I've never done a tip.
Understand. Yep, understand completely.
Harpers Ferry is in the process of, they might be finished, I don't know, with the water project. The water,
They're still in
they're
process.
still in process, okay. Would any of this money go to offset some of their costs that they incurred during this project or not? Or just, is this just for the top of the hill or?
Right now, it's just for the top of the hill.
Okay.
The real property TIF, it's amazing to say this, our property taxes aren't all that high in the state. So the amount of money that's thrown off from the real property TIF is, it won't cover the parking garage structure itself, especially given the cost increases that have come around.
Okay.
I know parking structures used to be, you could estimate them at $20,000 to $25,000 a slot. The most recent one I did came in at $45,000 a spot. And now there were soils issues with that one. I couldn't get that here, so, but that's where we are today with it.
Okay. All right. Well, obviously our next meeting will be in October. Look at my calendar and tell you when.
It's a 6.
October 6th, I guess, which our next meeting is a daytime meeting. It starts at 9:30. If you are interested in being on that meeting, I would just recommend doing an agenda request, send it in
Okay, I'll do that again.
to Jessica, and we'll, sure we'll get you on that meeting and get you for. So if there's a certain time, let us know. Typically, those meetings last about 3 hours. We can, we'll try to accommodate you best. I'm sure we'll try to accommodate you best we can.
Well, we appreciate it. We will definitely submit an agenda request for that meeting.
Okay. All right.
And I was gonna say, I had one question. I
Sure.
guess I just wanted to kind of get a clearer picture with how it affects the schools, because you had said it was neutral, but then you also said that it can increase how much money they're getting.
Mhm.
So is it neutral or is it increasing?
Well, that's an excellent question. I'm talking on both sides of my mouth. It's neutral relative to their allocation from the state relative to the school aid formula. Okay, so excess levies, and I don't, do you all have an excess levy and a bond levy or just a bond levy for
We have
schools?
We have a bond and a regular bond and a levy.
For the schools.
Yes.
Okay, so the state doesn't pay anything towards either the excess levy or the bond levy. Okay, those come solely from taxes on the taxpayers. And they're determined by what your value is of all your properties in the area, so how much people pay. Well, by Swan putting a $150 million facility in, the excess levy and the bond levy will apply to that $150 million. All right, now the 50 to 60% of the regular taxes that Swan would pay will be paid for, will be made up to the school aid formula. So it's both, if that helps. It just depends upon which tax we're talking about.
Does anybody have anything else? Going once or twice? All right. Thank you all for coming. This is very beneficial. We look forward to seeing you all on October 6th.
Thank
If you
you
have
all
any
very much.
questions, you can call, you know, you can call me anytime. If there's no other business to take up today, if there's no objections, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you very much.